Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's roundtable discussion on creating a cultural district in your community. My name is Michelle McCabe, and I am the Executive Director of Connecticut Main Street Center. We are so excited to be hosting this discussion. But before we begin, I just wanted to offer a few introductory words about our organization. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining the vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. Our mission is to assess, educate, convene, and advocate to develop and grow downtowns. The Connecticut Main Street Network extends throughout our state, and this network includes professionally managed downtowns and neighborhood districts, municipal planning and economic development departments, and 2 regional organizations representing the interests of many towns. We also have a professional affiliate membership program for industry professionals. This professional affiliate network provides our communities with access to specialized expertise relevant to downtown revitalization, preservation, economic and community development, real estate development, and more. There are many Connecticut Main Street members with us today, and I thank you for joining us. And for those of you who are not, we hope that you will reach out to us for more information. We are grateful to our sponsors and founding partners. The Connecticut Main Street Center's founding sponsors are Eversource and the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. And our growth sponsors are AvantGrid and the Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office. I am particularly excited for the conversation on cultural districts. There are so many communities for whom arts and culture serve as an anchor for their downtowns and main streets. Forming a cultural district is a wonderful opportunity for Main Street programs, municipal government, elected officials, small businesses, and arts and culture to all come together to collaborate. We were thrilled to host another webinar on this topic about a year ago, and the recording is available on our YouTube channel. That webinar was an in-depth overview of the process. Today's discussion will center around the experiences of those communities who have taken the leap, and I know that we're going to be learning a lot from them today. Just a few quick housekeeping notes. The webinar should be about an hour and a half, and I know that we have a lot of people joining us today, so we're going to use the chat feature to field questions. I will be monitoring the chat as we discuss, and I will ask questions as we go, and we'll have some more time at the end for additional discussion. And then, as Judith mentioned, we'll be circulating an evaluation after the webinar is over, and we hope that you'll take the time to fill it out because it gives us important information to be able to develop programs for the future. So now to introduce our speakers, they come to us. We have 3 designated regional service offices represented today, and they are the organizations that help shepherd the cultural district process for our communities. And 3 cultural districts representing Ridgefield, Torrington, and New London are joining us today. So I'm pleased to welcome Wendy Berry, who is the Executive Director of the Cultural Coalition of Southeastern Connecticut, Rich Martin, who's the Chair of the New London Cultural District Commission, Steph Burr, Executive Director of the Northwest Connecticut Arts Council, Rufus Rham, Executive Director of the Warner Theater in Torrington, Eileen Marriott, Museum Director of KidsPlay Museum in Torrington, Lisa Scails, Executive Director of the Cultural Alliance of Western Connecticut, and Glori Norwitt, the Chair of Ridgefield's Economic and Community Development Commission. And I want to offer a special thank you to Liz Shapiro, the Director of the Connecticut Office of the Arts, who has joined us today as well and can jump in to add any information that we need from her. So thank you. So Wendy, I will kick it off to you.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to provide a short introduction for those who don't have just some context around cultural districts in Connecticut, and just a brief basic kind of just setting us up for making sure we're on the same page as we get going in the conversation. Next slide. So it's fairly new in terms of having the opportunity for a municipality to form a cultural district. It began with legislation in 2019. And for those of us, I know Lisa and a few others, Liz and a few others who had planned to kind of help roll out cultural districts early in 2020, that was all put off by the pandemic. And so really it's been in the past just couple years that cultural districts have been kind of coming to life and seen as a recovery tool opportunity for towns, but it's relatively new in terms of legislation 2019 and then kind of getting this out into the public late 2020 and 2021. Next slide. Just in terms of definition, in terms of Connecticut's definition, it's a specific area of a city or a town identified by your municipality that has a number of cultural facilities, activities, and or assets, both for-profit and nonprofit. It's meant to be walkable, compact, and walkable, we'll talk about that later on, or not even like in another webinar, but walkable is relative to your community. It's a compact area that is easy for visitors to recognize. It's meant to be a center of cultural activities, artistic and economic, and a place in your town where community members congregate and visitors may enjoy those places to make a community special. That's the basic definition. Next slide. These are some of the reasons why a municipality would want to consider establishing a cultural district. I won't read them all, but essentially it's a tool for your community for many reasons. It's about thinking about your sense of place, about marketing it, promoting it, increasing tourism, thinking about strengthening the quality of life in that community, in that area, not just in the cultural district, but the surrounding areas, economic growth, and really thinking about how you can contribute to Connecticut's assets as a whole, but really thinking about highlighting the culture and history and relevancy of your community today. Next slide. These are not meant to be discussed today. These we're going to get into, like, this is a whole separate conversation in terms of process and procedure, but just so that you are aware of kind of some of the basic standards and criteria, your municipality must vote to approve a cultural district. It must be in Connecticut. It must meet the requirements of the cultural district definition, which have been fairly flexible in terms of meeting the needs and meeting municipalities where they are. It must have defined boundaries. You have to draw lines. It must be walkable and accessible, and those are relative terms in terms of how you think about your community. Should have cultural facilities and assets. You can also think about what is missing that you could use to help drive those assets into the cultural district by having a cultural district. Public infrastructure and amenities, bathrooms, things that might be helpful to have visitors come and stay and play. You have to hold at least one community input meeting in order to share the information with the people in your community to learn about the proposed cultural district and the goals. That's a requirement. And you must pass a resolution following that meeting to form the cultural district. And then you're going to form a cultural district commission, which we'll share a little bit more about that in the next slide. In terms of some specifics, a cultural district can span more than one town or city. For me specifically, we thought about Mystic. Mystic spans 2 towns. They would just have to be done in coordination with both municipalities. Your municipality can have more than one cultural district. Stonington's getting ready to go to town meeting for 2 next week, but 1 resolution is enough. And an inventory of cultural assets must be identified, included on the map. Next slide. So we know in kind of helping to form the process for a cultural district in Connecticut, we really thought about the opportunities in that most towns and cities don't want another commission and have a hard time filling their current commissions. So there are 3 pathways to have a cultural district commission. One is an entirely new commission that you are forming. One is to assign it. The second one is to assign it to an existing border commission and create an advisory council that reports to that border commission, or assigning it to an existing border commission that currently meets the membership requirements. And those are for another discussion about what those membership requirements, but there are pathways to make this work for your municipality so that you can form one in a structure that you already have. Next slide. The basic process is just determining whether or not your municipality is ready, and that is kind of discussion with your DRSO and potentially with Liz. Then you form a cultural district by the resolution, the community input session, the mapping, and the drawing of the lines. And once your town passes the resolution or ordinance to pass and create the cultural district, then that commission or advisory council begins the process to apply to become a state recognized cultural district, which is a whole different phase. And that you'll hear more about that at the end of the webinar. That's the basic information. I think that's the last slide, Michelle, if I'm correct. That's the basic information on a cultural district that should help set and frame the conversation.
Excellent, thank you. So I would invite everybody to unmute who are panelists, because now we'll just start the conversation whereby Wendy and Lisa and Steph can start the conversation with their representatives from the different organizations that launched the cultural district.
Did we decide who's going first?
I think we have you, Lisa, Ridgefield going first.
Okay. Okay. Glori. In so many ways, Ridgefield is a community primed to have a cultural district. It was, it made me proud, and certainly I know the town of Ridgefield for so many reasons. And some of the reasons just to go over the obvious, are also can be looked at as a model and inspiration for other communities that may not necessarily be ready today to apply for cultural districts, but could potentially look to use this as a tool to be able to build the resources and the assets around art and culture and to pull those together. Ridgefield has many arts and cultural offerings. It's historic and walkable downtown community. One of the criteria stipulates in the guidelines for becoming a cultural district is that each municipality must establish a cultural district commission. The guidelines offer several models to choose in the development of such a commission. Ridgefield chose to establish a cultural district committee. Being that Ridgefield was the first to establish a cultural district and with no precedent to follow, can you describe the structure of the cultural district committee and the steps that you took to develop it? And then finally, what advice would you give to others?
Yeah, hi, thanks very much, Lisa. Yes, we started the process off very quickly after the law was passed, and you at the Cultural Alliance had a informational session in December 2019. And when COVID hit and the lockdown, we just kept moving forward and did everything over Zoom. We were very lucky, as you said. Ridgefield has a multitude of arts and culture assets, and most of them are focused around the downtown area, and it's all walkable. So the first thing we did was we did everything through the commission I now chair, the Economic and Community Development Commission. It's a town commission. We're all appointed volunteers. And first, we simply went to our first selectman, Rudy Marconi, and said, we want to do this. He was completely in favor. Without a first selectman supporting you, a lot of times you can't get anything done. So, and then we just moved forward from there. And a lot of us on the commission already knew the leaders of the arts and culture organizations, the for-profit and the nonprofit organizations in our town. So our biggest problem was trying to decide who to not invite to our cultural district commission, because we had 11 people. We simply went through the categories in the new law saying you need someone, historic, from a historic organization, you need someone from this and that. And we got some people who met both criteria. And so we ended up with 11, but we did have people literally calling us saying, hey, how come I haven't been chosen? We decided to organize it by assigning the Cultural District Commission to be a subcommittee under the ECDC. And we have found that to be a much better structure for our town. And I'm sure every town is different, simply because there's so much going on here. There's so many nonprofits, there's so many for-profits. You have the ECDC, you have the Chamber of Commerce, you have the Downtown Ridgefield Association. So we didn't want to create another structure. And so that's been really helpful for us. Everybody who we invited joined our committee and has been willing to do anything that we asked of them. And I think that's also why, we were the first in the state, because everything just flowed very, very quickly. Everything was very easy for us. And we have a really a volunteer mentality in Ridgefield that everybody just jumps in and helps each other. So it really was just checking the boxes and kind of creating Lisa, as you know, and Liz, as you know, kind of creating the structure because we were the first to go through the process, and we were pushing it during the lockdown and trying to move forward. And of course, everything was slower, but yeah, it was all really wonderful.
So what advice would you give? Just if you can give a little piece on that in the development of your structure.
When you're picking people on your committee, make sure they're team players, and they're, you know, I imagine some people could be, these are organizations that compete with each other. They're trying to get people into the seats of their theaters or into their stores. And if they have a competition attitude, it's not going to be helpful. And it will just slow everything down. But yeah, it's hard for me to say what advice to give because everything went so easily for us. We didn't really find issues. Keeping in touch with your board of selectmen or your city council, just so that they completely understand why you're doing this and all the steps that are needed, so that everything keeps flowing, because you need, you know, those board of selectmen to vote on issues, to have a public hearing, and it just keeps everything moving very quickly. And for us, it still took over, you know, it was almost a year and a half, the whole process. But again, COVID slowed things down.
I have other questions, but I don't know how much time we were given for our questions.
Maybe what we could do is, it might be interesting to, as a comparative, we could go around and hear from Torrington and also from New London about how they formed their commissions, and because it'll be interesting, I think, for comparative. So I don't know, Steph, if you want to lead Torrington first.
Sure, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm here with Rufus from the Warner Theater and Eileen from KidsPlay Children's Museum in Torrington. So Rufus and Eileen, Torrington structured your committee a little bit differently. It's a subcommittee of the city's Economic Development Corporation, which is a 501c4 under the city. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose to do it that way, the benefits of that, and how that's sort of opened you up to advocacy and communication with the city?
Sure. I think we decided to sort of do this in terms of trying to align ourselves with the MDP, the Municipal Development Plan of the city, and also trying to get arts and culture voices onto that planning committee and that process, especially in Torrington, as we look to possibly get a hotel from our hotel, which has long been abandoned in our downtown and is a sore spot for us. But we wanted to make sure that the arts and culture was sort of had a voice at the table, and so we put it through the Torrington Development Corporation, which is the 501c4 public-private partnership organization that Steph was talking about. Eileen, I think you and I can both agree that this has benefits and downsides. Some of the downsides are, as a 501c4, it gets complicated fundraising and grant writing for support and funds for the cultural district's growth desires. But the upsides is definitely a much more direct line of cooperation between the city, development, and the arts. I think you're muted.
Sorry, just backing up a little bit, you know, in the same way that Glori was talking about how there was a groundswell of kind of collaboration that sort of preceded that. It's sort of like the group almost began to form and then found the right home, and it was led, you know, from the arts and culture piece. And so then it was kind of working with the city to find where is the right place to nurture this cultural district committee.
Thank you. And do you want to talk a little bit more about your current committee structure and how you are seeing this moving forward into the future?
Sure. So we currently have several we are a subcommittee of TDC. So Eileen and I, as co-chairs of the cultural district, sit in on the TDC board meetings. And then we have we try to have a monthly cultural district meeting. And then we have subcommittees within that based around asset mapping, communications, events. I think we have maybe one more subcommittee. I should know as the chair, but I just had my first cup of coffee. And so we try to meet weekly or monthly, and then have the subcommittees meet during that month too, to report back to the committee as a whole on the next month. And right now, I think we meet in the morning, but we've also discovered one of the tricks is that not with a large committee like this, it's hard to get everybody's schedule on the same time frame. So trying to be flexible, give out Zoom links, do hybrid meetings is really critical to make sure that a diversity of voices are on your committee, because we have business owners and people that are working during the day and they can't meet in person all the time.
Thank you. I'll throw it over to Wendy.
Okay, thanks. So Rich Martin here, friend. So Edie, your cultural district commission, it's been, I think we've seen it, it's been over a year now, well over a year. It was a fairly quick process, I would say, in terms of other towns. I think from beginning to end, 6 to 9 months, maybe. I think 9 months is probably where it landed in terms of getting it passed. It was, you can talk about this, but the City of New London chose to kind of replace their Economic Development Commission with the Cultural District Commission. Their Economic Development Commission was not as functional and as vibrant as they had hoped it to be as an advisory commission. And so they actually then changed it, and the Cultural District Commission replaced it. And so Rich chairs that. But in terms of the early successes, that one I think that were pivotal was that the city empowered the brand new Cultural District Commission with $500,000 of ARPA funding right off the bat, which gave it legs right off the bat. So some early successes around being tapped to, you've done some initiatives in terms of an event subsidy program, the Big Belly program, shuttle bus for Connecticut Open House Day in Juneteenth. You've developed new arts and cultural initiatives. You're managing a major mural restoration. You've been tapped, so you got a lot of things that were kind of thrown at you all when you became this, but some money to support it. But can you talk a little bit about working within and with government bureaucracy as being a learning lesson, and kind of some of the things that you've learned, both positive and challenging, from your point of view as being this kind of interesting role between the creative sector and the municipality? It's a lot, but I front loaded it for you, Rich.
That's a lot, yeah. Well, I guess just to keep the focus on like the development, we did replace the Economic Development Commission. It had basically gone dormant in our city. It really wasn't doing anything. And we had some proactive counselors who really believed in the arts and culture as a vehicle for the economic development of the city. And so that really gave us a charge right from the start. As with all the cultural districts, we're represented, our representatives are, members of the arts community, the small business community, residents who live in the downtown. I guess the challenges is, similar to what Rufus was saying, is getting people to meet regularly. We have a monthly meeting. We had ambitious plans for subcommittees, and those sort of come and go depending on this time of year and when our schedules are really busy. So it's not always easy to maintain those sub meetings, which I think are really important. So that's something that we'll be working on in the future. And hopefully we'll bring some members who aren't necessarily voting members of the commission into those committees so that we can get a little more workload going from others in the community. As far as working with the city, I mean, we're very fortunate to get these ARPA monies. It was a little daunting learn the process of how to actually spend money within the city. It's not as easy as just saying, hey, let's do this thing and writing a check. We have to, get, the requisite quotes and make sure that, everybody's above board there, and then pass it by our commission. And then we need to present it to the city council, who then also has to approve it. And so that time frame can take a while. And that was a big learning curve for me, that, from an idea blossoming to actually getting approval to spend money, it can be a 2 or 3, if not longer, month process. And so we're learning to adjust to that. The ARPA monies are really useful. We can do some big projects out of the gate, but we have to keep in mind that they're one-time seed money for our group. And so we're working hard now to identify grants and go for grants while we have these matching monies, so that we can start getting monies into the system for down the road. So that's really important, so that we don't just go through this initial budget. Our committee actually only has a $5,000 budget through the city. So post ARPA, that $500,000 is a lot of money, but 5,000 is nothing. And you get a few memberships and subscriptions, and you're done with that budget. So yeah, a big part of our work right now is taking that money, having some big splash, projects successfully implemented, and then using it to leverage to get additional monies down the road, so that we can keep the machine going, I guess.
Do you have one particular unanticipated positive outcome and one unanticipated negative, kind of more like unexpected, challenge?
Yeah, I guess the positive is that, there's been a lot of efforts in our city over the years, and some of them, they faltered over time, and they've created these silos in our community. I think we've all talked about that over the years. And there's a lot of hope around this idea that finally there's a focus on arts and culture, which have been a driving force in our community for so long, and that the council and the mayor have really acknowledged that and said, no, we need the arts and culture. It needs to be forefront in our investments, and let's go for it. And I think it's the first time that we're feeling everybody sort of coming together underneath an umbrella that we can all agree to. We'll see how long that lasts. I guess the detriment is that, everybody sees that we got these monies and they think that they deserve it, and we want as many people to get it as possible. But there's a lot of misconceptions about what we can and can't do with the money. And so maneuvering that so that we're encouraging people to come forward with ideas, but also to be realistic and not become haters of the work that we're doing because they didn't get what they wanted funded. So those things are kind of pulling against each other, but it's the good work, right? So.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.
Lisa, you mentioned that you had other questions, so why don't we kick it back to Ridgefield, and maybe we can go around the horn again with more discussion.
Yeah, it's really a basic question. Glori, I was just wondering, since the district there in Ridgefield got set up first, maybe you can share your thoughts on what opportunities did you start out thinking that the cultural district, establishing a cultural district would do, and what are some of the realities now today, and if there are any differences?
Yeah. So yes, in Ridgefield, we really hoped that this would just shed more light on what we have to offer in our town. We may have someone come for a show. We want them to come for a show and dinner and shopping and stay a while, or come for a full weekend and stay in a hotel and go hiking. And so we wanted people just to know more. And we were really hoping this would be a boost to marketing our town more and in a bigger realm. So what we did right when we got the designation was we decided to create an event to celebrate it, because that would be the biggest boom for marketing. So we organized at our Contemporary Art Museum outside on a beautiful May day. We invited the governor, who attended, our state senator, our state reps. Liz came, Lisa came, everyone was there. Again, because of COVID, we were restricted, but we did have about 100 people outside and some newspapers and one news channel. So essentially we were marketing ourselves. But because of the title, we had more people show up and more people write about it. So that was very good. We were hoping this would continue. We did have a few months later, the New York Times wrote an article about our town, and it was a pretty extensive article. We assume the cultural district designation was one of the reasons that they noticed us and decided to write about us at that time. But since then, there hasn't been much other than us, again, promoting ourselves and repeatedly saying, hey, we have this designation, we're first in the state, et cetera, et cetera. So we really hoped that the state would be promoting this more, but I feel the state really needs a clear avenue of support for tourism here. We've talked about possibly on the state tourism website having a specific section on all the cultural districts in the state and promoting it in that way or in other ways. And in that regard, the more cultural districts we have in the state, the more I think it will get promoted. Right now, I think it was said there's 3. I know there's more applications out there.
Yeah. I think it's coming. It's good that you brought it up. But I think you raise a good point, and I think that kind of connection and promotion and marketing from the state on the state level. I mean, I'll let Liz speak to it because she can speak to it better. But I think it is coming. What I'm curious about, though, on a local level, I mean, you guys did do a good job in marketing the designation when it first came out the gate, and you guys have a wonderful website and you're doing all of the right things locally. Has that momentum there, though, on a local level? Were you able to capture that momentum? Did it lead, and was it leveraged to go anywhere else as far as your own local planning? I mean, can you talk a little bit about how you leveraged that?
Yeah, so again, we were marketing ourselves on this. So we took the acorn logo that actually one of our Ridgefield commissioners created that the state ended up using for all the towns, which is just wonderful. We made window clings and had, I don't know, 120 or 150 of them made. And then we literally went door to door and handed them to every business, nonprofit or for-profit, in the cultural district. So they all have them in their windows, again, to just announce to everybody, we're a cultural district, hey, pay attention to everything in the town. And then when we received, when the town received our ARPA funding and the state, I'm sorry, but I can't remember if it was a state office of tourism or who specifically said, like, hey, every town give 1% of your ARPA funding to arts and culture. So instead of that, we went to our first selectman and started talking, and he said, why don't you push for 10%? And so we did, and it was a lot of work. The ECDC, we worked with our local arts council, who also has a strong chair, and we talked to every nonprofit arts and culture organization in our town. There's 25 of them. We got 22 of them to actively participate. We got their annual budget numbers, their annual attendance numbers. It was a lot of work compiling all this information and looking at which organization, comparing them in size. And so we went to our board of selectmen and said, hey, give us 10% of your ARPA funding, which we also had to push before, every town spent their ARPA. I don't know if any town has any ARPA money left over, but we wanted to get in there before it was gone. And in the end, we got about 9% of our town's ARPA funding going to the 22 local nonprofit arts and culture organizations. And when it was $665,000. And then we had made a chart and given that to our board of selectmen to say, this is how it would be distributed. And it was all based on a percentage, looking at your budget number, And then whoever's had the, larger budgets would get more money. Smaller organizations, if your budget was, I think it was if your budget was under $50,000, I'm forgetting the numbers precisely, but certain people would just get a flat, $1,000 or a flat $10,000, just so that there was some kind of equity in when you got to the smaller organizations. But it was significant for every organization. And then the checks were just cut this past December, like a few months ago.
Yeah.
And so at a Arts Council meeting, all of the nonprofit arts and culture organizations came together and we handed them their checks and did photo shoots, and people were very happy. And there was,
I'm glad you raised this, Glori, because it's no small thing. And I am a firm believer that the cultural district designation played a large part in that. The bringing together of art and culture and historic assets in a community. For what I think in my recent memory anyway, is the first time, right? So, I mean, it's easy for us to sort of brush over and go and move past the significance of bringing the diversity of minds in all of these fields and industries, and for art and culture to be at a table, and for then to be established as a cultural district, and for you all to do your due diligence, as you did very well in raising the importance of the designation and the attention that brought. I think that the ARPA funding that was allocated for AMC in Ridgefield, in no small way, I think that had a lot to do. So the establishment of districts can make a significant impact and in a very short period of time. And I was just hoping that you would point that out. Liz, I see that you addressed the tourism issue in the chat. So I want to encourage everybody to read that if you haven't, but maybe this would be a good time, Michelle, to just, Liz, if you want to speak to it directly.
Sure, I absolutely can. So as the cultural districts have been evolving, right, their needs have been evolving, because when you create something from scratch, you're like, I think they're going to need this, but you don't really know what they're going to need. And because we have so much flexibility in the program, we have our guidelines. But often when you work with your DRSO leader to talk about your application, what happens is they will come to me and be like, okay, this town wants to start with 2, or this one is really hard to walk because it's a mile in one direction. Is 2 miles walkable? Like questions like that. And so that's where we go through and say, oh yeah, that's good. Or maybe let's think about it a different way. So we're all putting our hats on together to sort of noodle over some of these questions. So the question about the, advertising from tourism, here's the thing with tourism. Tourism has 3 staff people, and the CT Visit platform, if you've been using it or looked at it recently, and I highly encourage you to do so, is like 10,000 times better and easier to use than it was last time in the previous iteration. That said, y'all have to use it, right? And it's not just y'all, it's like people have to use it and update their profiles to let other people know what's happening. And the more you update it, it's like any other online, web-based algorithm. The more you're adding information, the more it rises to the top, the more it gets sort of funneled to staff to say, hey, this group is really active. It's putting lots of different stuff in. We should probably highlight what they're doing. So that's like the secret to the success of the algorithm there. I'm not saying this is perfect. The thing that I am working with tourism to do, and you'd think it would be easy, but when it's web-based, it's not easy, because generally speaking, it means you've got to hire someone to come in and do it. And that is, and I put this in the chat, to add a specific category for cultural districts under the Do tab. And I linked that tab there so you can see what I mean. I think that that's it's probably the easiest place to put it. And then of course that would do all the hyperlinking kinds of things. The other thing I think I can say, so that's the tourism issue. And I know the funding question hasn't really come up, but I will make a note that those cultural districts who applied for funding from the Connecticut Cultural Fund got funded. So there is a pathway to funding. for the cultural districts right now, if the legislature continues to provide funding for the sector in the way that is being discussed right now in legislative session, actually at 1:23 this afternoon when the Commerce Committee is having its hearings.
And aren't they eligible for federal, if I understand, and I think I was looking at the NEA, I believe cultural districts are eligible for NEA funding as an actual category.
So I believe they are too. So, and Wendy, I think you mean like applying directly to the NEA and or receiving funds from us, because we are partially funded by the NEA. So they're two separate things. And I believe the answer is yes. Because this is just something that everybody wants to encourage right now. So funding from the state for cultural districts really is dependent on how much funding is out there. And, you know, we were just in a situation where there was like lots of money out there. And right now there's a worry that lots of money is going to go away, because in fact, it is going away. However, we've shown what this arts, culture, tourism sector can do working together. And I work for the governor. I support the governor's budget. That is my job as a state employee. However, what I would say is y'all have the right to your opinions as well. And so, and there are ways of making your opinions heard. And during the cultural district process, I will tell you, I think every single celebration of a cultural district that I was invited to included your local legislators, and they were really psyched about being there. Some of them even came on the tours of the district with me. So as cultural districts, you might want to share information about like how you could use help. And if money is one of those things that might solve some problems, then, you know, it's up to you to make your specific cases. So, and the more people, you know, who have a louder voice, the more people hear you. So I'll step out now, but I'm here.
Michelle, can I ask a question for all three that I'm just kind of putting one together in my head of, is that okay?
Oh my gosh, please.
Okay.
I'm just here to learn
You're here
alongside our participants.
I mean, I'm
from
thinking
you
of
all.
like, I'm hearing three different kind of uses, kind of initial uses of the cultural district commissions, right? One around advocacy for ARPA funding, one around kind of coordination and marketing. Rich, I think of as being more project and program oriented because they had the money to kind of get some quick things done. But I'm curious from each of the three, what were the kind of low hanging fruit that were kind of the initial, like, what can we just get done right off the bat? Was it advocacy? Was it information? Was it just coordination or projects?
And actually, if I may ask Torrington, if you wouldn't mind stepping in first to answer that question, that would be great.
Eileen, do you want to take this one? You're muted.
Thank you. Yes. You know, I think that we have done some advocacy around getting some of the ARPA funding for both the TDC, which will be mostly allocated to some other projects other than like the cultural district elements to it, the hotel project that Rufus recommended, and certainly to individual organizations that applied for ARPA funding. Being a part of this effort and movement has been really helpful for that. We have had some work around coordinating events, and you know, we had like a Halloween hoopla that came together, and it was very grassroots. You know, organizations kind of, or people who on the committee who kind of brought together some focused activities, but we're also trying to separate out the kind of based on those committees, because the last thing we really want to do is get kind of pigeonholed into program and event planning, when really a very big impact that we need to have is to draw tourism, is to draw people to our downtown every day of the year, so that they can support the local businesses and the whole district can thrive. So I think we're really trying to make sure that the committee as a whole is really balanced in the way it is approaching the different goals it has. Liz,
Yeah.
I saw your finger go up, so I don't know if you have a point there. Nope. Okay. So I think that we've been really trying to be cautious around it, not making sure we are not going to become an events planning organization. So Rufus, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say like the most immediate impact for us was instead of all of our organizations individually having meetings with the mayor or the economic development or even our representatives, it was all of a sudden arts and culture had a very, very strong voice. And we had demonstrable evidence of the impact that we had. You know, when we closed down, downtown died. You know, like when KidsPlay wasn't able to open, Warner wasn't open, 5 Points wasn't open, all of the things that give heart to downtown, we lost restaurants, we lost businesses. It was immediate and apparent, and that gave us this unique opportunity to break down silos. I think, I can't remember who said this, but I think it was Glori, but think from a place of abundance mindset rather than scarcity mindset, to say that we're better together and we're more powerful together. And so that's been powerful here, especially because before Office of the Arts was Office of the Arts, and it was Connecticut Commission for the Arts or something. They declared Torrington a culturally deprived area in the 80s, and now look where we are. So I think we've come a long way, but this is like really, I would say the advocacy piece and actually getting a voice at the table was by far the most important and most immediate. And communication. I mean, we've had more communication, more open communication between business owners and cultural organizations downtown than in the 6 or 7 years I've been working in Torrington.
And I'll just add to that a little bit. I think the asset mapping piece of the cultural district application is so important. Just having a list, compiling everyone's email list together so that everyone can be on the same page about things that are happening. We're hearing less and less, oh, I didn't even know that was going on. I think that's a really, really important side effect of the whole cultural district application process, is getting that email list and starting to open up the communications so that everyone can be on the same page.
Yeah, and to add to that, I completely agree with what the three of you just said. And regarding the email list, yeah, for us, it was really, it flowed right from, in COVID, the governor had said he wanted every town and city to create a recovery committees. And so in our town, we had one for business and jobs recovery subcommittee, and then an arts and culture recovery subcommittee. And we started those right away, and it went hand in hand with our cultural district application, because we had the leaders of these organizations, and we were meeting monthly over Zoom in April lockdown and May lockdown, and for the next year. We were having the ECDC was organizing monthly Zoom conversations with the leaders of these nonprofits, just to say, what are you doing? What are you doing with masks this month? And are you changing how you do it? And are you changing how many people are allowed in your building? And for leaders to be able to come together very quickly, very easily over Zoom and discuss this, it was extremely helpful. And what we found in Ridgefield, and I imagine it's true in other towns, is, we're very lucky to have very good, strong leaders of our nonprofits, but they're really busy running their own organization. And so if you have someone who can just manage all of them together, bring them all together, be very efficient, have a set agenda for each meeting, and they will show up. And they're happy to help. They just don't have the time to lead any kind of projects. And that's where our town commission was able to do that. That's what our job is economic and community development. And they're ready to jump in, and they're ready to follow, because they're too busy leading in their day job.
Liz, I see your hand is up. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, I always put my
Excellent.
hand up on purpose. Well, sometimes I don't. One of the things I was going to say, I think something to consider too about this, the mapping, the cultural asset mapping that has to come with the cultural, creating a cultural district. I'd see Eileen shaking her head. It is so interesting to actually go through that exercise, because the first thing you actually have to think about is like, who comes to mind, and they're all be in the room, so they're going to tell you, and then you're like, what other things do we consider as part of our sort of cultural sector? And the reason that is so important, I mean, it's important for a whole lot of reasons, but I'll tell you a reason that it's really important that it may not be like front of mind is, arts, culture, tourism has a very big economic input. 7-to-1 as of our 2016, 17 data, right? $1 in, $7 out. But if you are looking to create a culturally vibrant space downtown, and that is not just vibrant, but economically viable, then cultural district, this creation, these steps to create might be something that will be able, it will help you actually get some real data about economic development in your municipality, which then helps us get this impact of the sector across the state. And some of you may or may not know, we're in the middle of an arts and economic impact study right now as partners with the Americans for the Arts, and each of our designated regional service organizations, that's Wendy's group, that's Lisa's group, and Steph's group, are actually participating as liaisons to the cultural organizations to gather this data. And it is so important, because this is how we make impactful arguments about supporting the cultural sector and the creative sector in Washington and in Connecticut. So it's really important.
Michelle, I see some questions coming in on the chat.
Yes, there are a lot of really great questions here. And actually, I'd love to go to the most recent one asked by Michelle Gora from Washington. It's a question that was actually percolating in my mind as well, which is, especially those of you in your communities of New London, Ridgefield, and Torrington, have you been collecting that kind of data that comes out of these really interesting and important relationships? It's like what you had mentioned, Rufus. We saw what happened when you took everything away. I'm curious if there's data that's being collected now that you're gathering all of these different sectors that are on Main Street around the table to solve collective problems. So, when there are issues of vacancy or retail that's suffering, et cetera, how do you collaborate, and then how do you measure the impact of these new relationships?
So specifically for Torrington, we're currently working on some asset mapping on a platform called Ginkgo, which is a sort of city planning. It's made usually specifically for bids or SSIDs, but special service districts and business improvement districts. But it allows us to track physical assets, overlay GIS map data onto things. So it's allowing us to hopefully start tracking, open real estate businesses, vacancies, all of that stuff as a baseline. And then the hope is over the next couple of years, we can sort of produce, an annual report. That might be too ambitious, but we're going to try. And I think using the AAP data that Liz was just talking about in conjunction with that, because at the end of this process, each community will actually get a calculator that they can put into place so that we can actually say, okay, all of the cultural organizations can combine annualized visitor data and then get a number based on that economic calculator of the economic impact that we have. And we actually paid for a cultural district specific subset of the study for the Northwest corner, again, so that we have a baseline to then grow from. It is hard. There's a lot of anecdotal data of just talking to, I know like Matt Cipriano, who owns Sasso's Pizza, which if you like wood-fired pizza, come to Torrington, it's really good. He's actually a business that's expanded during COVID and right after COVID. And he has directly told me that it's because of the amount of visitors that the cultural organizations bring to downtown that he's actually been able to expand. So even if I only bring in 130 people to come watch The Shining on a Thursday night, you know, I might look at it saying, I wish there was 300 people. I have a 1,700 seat venue. You know, I wish there was 300 people, but for him, he's full and all the other restaurants are full, even with 130 people. So I think that that's that kind of anecdotal data that you can collect and then maybe work with CT Main Street and Office of the Arts and your RSOs to help advocate for that kind of thing.
And I do want to point out, thank you, Liz has put some of that information in the chat. And I think that this also emphasizes how important it is for us to make sure that we're getting this information out to the folks that are on this particular webinar, because keep in mind, we have elected officials and economic development staff and directors here that might not normally have these opportunities to have conversations with arts and culture in this way. And so the more information that we can share with them to connect these dots is really so important and impactful. I don't know if anyone if Glori or Rich, if you have anything that you want to add in terms of documenting the impacts of these cross-sector collaborations that occur.
So in Ridgefield, we don't have any updated numbers. We collected some early on and for our application, and then to tell you the truth, we were busy seeking the ARPA funding and different things. So I feel like we were busy just doing the work and not seeing what the effect was from the work. So it's definitely something we hope to do in the near future.
Yeah, we're kind of in a similar boat. We did hire a coordinator for our district, and so our hope is that she will be more present at events in the coming year so that we are collecting some data and some feedback. We've also encouraged the Office of Economic Development and Planning to be creating a map of our vacancies in the downtown so that we can better focus on those. They've done some good work in creating monies for those vacant properties to be built out wherever possible and working with the owners, but we want more specific knowledge of what's ready to receive for artists and businesses and people who want to come in and invest. So we're working with them to get that data, but we've not collected a lot yet, to be honest.
Eileen, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just, one thing, and it's not data based, but, earlier in their conversation, there was this idea that came up of like sometimes arts organizations can be a little competitive in terms of like, there's this, pie of donors and like in the region and, who's going to get donations from what organization or people, there's only so many people who are going to attend things. One thing, the Cultural District Commission and just coming out of this recovery, kind of working together is like, we are not, this sense of competitiveness is not really there as much, I think, as it used to be. And it really is like, okay, how are we going to work together to make the pie bigger so all of our organizations thrive? And so while there's not the like data behind that, there's just this sense of collaboration that really it has changed. And I think that what's great is that the cultural district can kind of keep everybody working towards the same goals.
Thank you, Eileen. I have a question in the chat around an open air band shell. And actually, I think that this can be extended to other towns that are starting with a building or a venue that might actually not have a particular organization associated with it yet, but are looking to create that arts and culture atmosphere, starting with a location. So the question is, does anyone have any experience around creating a commission or something of that nature that can oversee scheduling events or performances in a particular venue?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say from my experience, it's best to leave that to, you know, if it's a municipal owned property, to leave that to somebody like a Parks and Rec who has a clear mandate to program that kind of community event. I think it'd be very difficult to spin up a cultural district and a cultural organization at the same time, as you're just not going to get the buy-in and the volunteer hours that you need to make both successful if you try to do both with the same organization and the same committee at the same time. That being said, it should work in conjunction with the cultural district so that the cultural district can help promote and try to drive and bring people downtown. But that's just in my experience in both Kent and Torrington, seeing what works and what doesn't.
Thank you, Rufus.
I don't know if that answered your question, but that's just.
We also had a question about the use of the economic development councils in starting a cultural district. Jim Bolano, I know you posed the question. I don't know if there's any, I see your hand is raised. I think I can unmute. Well, no.
You want me to figure out how to unmute him?
We
don't currently have it set up for that.
Yeah, Jim, if you could just put your question in the chat, I'll do my best. I know you're, or I could try to read your lips, but that probably won't be as efficient. Sorry, y'all, we have set up our webinar since we had so many attendees that you have to unfortunately go through me and my interpretive skills to ask questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's, so in Connecticut, there's two different types, like there's the local EDCs that are municipal based, and then there's the regional economic development that are more like EDA, getting federal EDA funding and doing more regional planning. So I would say from our point of view, at least in Torrington, like it is absolutely beneficial to work if the municipality has a local EDC. To work through them. And there's a lot of places in Massachusetts. So the Connecticut model is based on the Massachusetts cultural district model. And that's how a lot of them are set up. And actually in Torrington's process, we talked to several commissions from Massachusetts of what worked and what didn't. And a lot of them suggested going through their local EDC, which is sort of why we ended up with, in the TDC, the Torrington Development Corporation in Torrington. And then regionally, you can report up to the regional economic development planning.
Glori, isn't Ridgefield pretty much set up that way?
That's exactly how we did it. The Economic and Community Development Commission, the town commission of appointed volunteers. Like I was saying before, we already have this commission. We're very active and connected with arts and culture. And so it was much easier to already have people who are, understanding what the town needs and already have the connections. And then, like I was saying before, like we just really needed to organize the nonprofits that are already doing the good work and already have the assets. And so they were happy to jump on board. And having the commission, you do need someone to be driving this. And in our town, that's what our commission is there to do anyway.
Yeah, and Jim, I would just add for Jim and anyone else that's interested in going that route too. I mean, look at the guidelines, of course, if you want to get serious about starting a district, an application for a district, but to do it the way that Ridgefield has done it and possibly others, it's an extension of the EDC commission. So that there are other members that you'd have to include there. And I think there's like 6 categories or something like that, 6 or 8. So there needs to be you need to build it out so that that committee now is reflective of art and culture with these various representatives. So that's just something to keep in mind.
And I'll add that it's interesting that, as the program kind of continues to evolve, we're learning so much so that right now, like I said, Stonington is going to town meeting on Monday. Initially, they were going to do the advisory committee to the EDC, which is an advisory commission to the town. Over time, and I will admit, Stonington has taken it's been 18 months that we've been working with them, but they're doing 2 cultural districts with a plan for 4 ultimately. They've since in the process along the way realized that a separate new commission was actually the better way to go for them. And so they're creating a whole new cultural district commission, and they're doing it in coordination with the borough. So Stonington Borough is, a separate municipality, but they do a lot of things together as part of the town. And so they're doing a borough town joint commission that will serve the whole town and the 4 villages, 2 of which will have cultural districts. So what I love is that we're able to really work with every municipality to really talk out what is the best structure, what do you have in place, what's missing, how can this be a tool that is going to last? It's meant to be permanent infrastructure in your government. That's the benefit to the arts community, is that this is permanent infrastructure. But really figuring out where it belongs and where it can have legs is such important work. And so we're learning as we go along, and you all sharing is really helping all of us to help provide more information back on what are the options. And the idea of putting it in an outside 501c3 or a community development corporation, that's like that, I need to look more into that. This is good to hear. So it's just know that there's options available, that, the Office of the Arts has been very supportive of having this be an evolving program that works, right? And so nothing is so hard and fast that Liz hasn't said no to anybody right yet. Right, Liz?
Uh-oh. She's setting you up there, Liz.
So can I just follow up with that? Yeah, so thank you for bending the rules and letting me in. But so Lisa kind of addressed this. I think the EDC model is attractive for us for 2 reasons. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And like New London, we have an EDC that's kind of, wandering a little bit. They don't really know their purpose because you have a professional on staff. A lot of towns, I think, struggle with that. But my question goes to kind of what Lisa said is, the makeup of the commission, there are some requirements. I'm not sure our EDC, they can definitely create a subcommittee among themselves. I'm not sure if they can do one and bring a whole new group in that meets the criteria of the commission for representation. So did anyone have to tweak their, legislatively in town, have to do anything to make it happen? Or were they just able, I think, Rich, you said you reformed or replaced your EDC.
Yeah. I mean,
did you do that legislatively in town?
Yeah, the council had to pass a resolution that replaced that commission with our commission based on the rules from the state. So yeah,
Gotcha.
I mean, Wendy could probably speak to that better. You were part of that process.
Yeah, I think that was, so we did see the need in a couple of towns to make some changes on the on the governance side to support that. In Stonington, what they realized was that the advisory committee, the representation requirements for a cultural district commission are very specific, as you can see, and they wanted more people, but their EDC is working really, really well right now. And so it really comes down to looking at, like, if something is not working well in terms of economic development in your town, and this is an opportunity, the challenge is that you do have to think about that representation. An artist has to be on the cultural district commission. And so there are, kind of the membership requirements are not your traditional commissioners. And so part of the role, I think, the onus on the regionals is to help provide some opportunity for helping newbie commissioners, such as artists, be able to come on to a commission role and understand the government side. That, to me, is where there's a little bit of tension of how we make sure that we're following government protocol and policies, and that the commission is doing what it's supposed to be doing. and yet having people who have never been at the table before who kind of need a little bit more of a learning curve on that. But yes, Jim, to your question, we're seeing a lot of adjusting, kind of rules and ordinances to support these structures as they evolve.
I actually have a question that piggybacks on that. I'm putting on a different hat right now as somebody who lives in Fairfield and is part of town government there. Are there examples of cultural districts in terms of rewriting ordinances around whether the commission members are electors in that town? Because that is something that is in a lot of charters, that commissions have to be electors, i.e. they live in that town. And as we know, there are staff of arts and culture organizations that exist in a community that actually don't necessarily live in that community. So are there any examples of how to address that problem?
It's a good, I know we've asked this in the past before. We have one particular borough warden who is very clear that the town charter says that no commissioner may serve on a commission unless they are a resident, that is state law. And yet the advisory committee has the option of kind of altering that a little bit. But we saw that those who are creating new commissions, that is according to state law. And so they are abiding by that. But that's something we have to remind them of. That's the flexibility of the advisory council or committee, is that then you can adjust that, whereas you're going to be limited to people in your town specifically if you choose to do a brand new commission.
Thank you.
And that's where I think if you can use your economic, and like we use the Economic and Community Development Commission, and then the advisory, the cultural district was a subcommittee. So any of our subcommittee members didn't necessarily have to be residents of the town. But that was very helpful.
And we have that same advantage in Torrington as well.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Eileen. One of the things I just put in the chat is if you're in a situation where you're kind of perhaps perplexed about how to move forward with a cultural district, and you have never gotten a whole bunch of people in the cultural sector together with people in municipal government and business owners, we have a possible solution for you, and that is by participating in our AIR program, Connecticut AIR, AIR. I put the link to the program up. You can visit it on the website, and then you could reach out to our AIR activator. And what essentially that program is, it is a national program. It's now being used, I think, in 10 different states in partnership with the AIR Collaborative. And it starts with a 2-hour, which could be held virtually, kind of workshop that's called Engage, and basically goes over what the AIR process looks like. Is your community ready and interested in coming together for a really deep conversation about any topic? It doesn't need to be necessarily forming a cultural district, but it brings a lot of people together. And then if you participate in the Engage workshop, which is facilitated by our trained Connecticut-based facilitators, you can go on to actually what is a 30-hour workshop over the 16-hour workshop, 16-hour workshop. Sorry, 30 seemed wrong. 16-hour workshop over the course of 3 days, 2 half days and 1 full day, where you bring a group of people together, and at the end of that process, you come out with a project that you have designed, and you have a business plan for the project that everyone has participated in. So if the project is moving forward to create a cultural district, you will have a business plan to doing that, and you will have people who have been identified as people who are interested in that solution. So I would encourage you to take a look on the website and talk to your DRSO leader, or reach out to our AIR facilitator, AIR activator, who's can be reached through the website. Her name is Virginia Flood.
Thank you, Liz. So we have about 15 or so minutes left, and I want to offer again to all those in attendance, if there are any questions that you would like to directly and specifically ask, especially for our visitors who have formed their own cultural districts. And if we don't have any particular questions, I would offer some potential closing remarks from each of you, and then we can spend the end of this discussion going through some process directives that Wendy has generously offered to walk us through on the process of forming a cultural district. So I want to open it up to last words before we head into a quick overview of how the process goes. It's your last chance, everyone. Don't all crowd the chat at once.
I'll just say that I think it's crucial for our recovery, not only economic, but from a health and well-being. I mean, there's this, I don't know, I live in Kent, so we are a rapidly aging population with not many young people moving in, which leads to isolation, especially during COVID. And arts and culture is what brings the town together and what brings people together. And I read a study somewhere that isolation is like smoking 5 packs of cigarettes a day in terms of impact on your health. And so, like, not only is this crucial for recovery for our economics for downtowns, but it's crucial for recovery from the last 3 years of trauma for our populations, our citizens, and our community. So I think, like, yes, there are things that we're figuring out because we're the first 3 cultural districts and we're kind of going through this together, but I think the benefits are pretty clear for why your community should embrace arts and culture as central to recognizing their importance in your community.
Absolutely. Well stated, Rufus. And, I think, certainly looking at it from a Main Street perspective, recognizing that we as a state are trying to retain and bring in a young workforce, recognizing that our workplace behaviors have changed. And so with offices not functioning the way they used to, and consumer habits not functioning the way they used to, like we've been seeing across the state, where restaurants seem to be recovering pretty well, but retail is really, really struggling. And we were just talking about before everybody came on about my visit to Torrington and all of the great places to eat. But, if we all have main streets that are nothing but restaurants, and there are only so many meals that we can have in a day. So we want to be able to have that sort of diversity of activity on Main Street. And I think that arts and culture is such an absolutely critical piece of that. And these cultural districts are allowing the conversations to happen across sectors that I think otherwise are more challenging to have. So I think this is just a really exciting opportunity. So with that, I will put the PowerPoint back on. Wendy, if you want to lead us through.
I think actually there's a good question. And I saw Liz, I think Liz, you had your hand up just a second ago, but there's a good question that might be, and Lisa was going to go through the second set of slides, but the question about the walkability, about how to draw the lines and where to draw the lines is really interesting in terms of overlays of historical districts or other arts districts. But I wonder if each of the representatives of each town can share that, walkability is very relative. New Haven's walkability is very different than Salem's or in other small towns. So in terms of how you thought about walkability and drawing those lines, if you could each share that, I think that'd be helpful to the other towns. And I like the question about the corridor, is it possible? And the connection of the district to the outside area, just because they're not in the district doesn't mean they're not connected to it. So if you could each respond to that, that'd be great about your process.
The city council set our boundaries from the get-go, and it was the obvious, we're a pretty small city, so it's State and Bank Street, and we've got a city center district that was those lines. It's our central business district, but it didn't include some very important historic assets, including the Hempstead House, the the Ye Ancient Burial Ground, which is one of the oldest burial grounds in New England, and as well as a lot of the markers that are part of the recently established Black Heritage Trail. So we ended up expanding our boundary out just a little bit. It's still very walkable. It's still less than a mile radius, but it got all of our partners thinking differently about where our visitors might walk to when they come to visit, or when they come to have a meal, when they go shopping, that they can do these other things too. And so I would just say, make sure you don't limit yourself when you're doing that. I mean, you don't want an expansive district, but you do want to make sure that you're including some stuff that may be on the fringes that you can incorporate and allow to come into the fold. So
I would also just jump in and piggyback on that. And I put a lot of it, I'm a chat user, so it's a lot in the chat. But remember that a cultural district is a municipality's commitment, right, to arts and culture as a way to thrive. And so you may not be included in the district, but there's no reason why folks in the district cannot promote those outside of the district, right? Because, hey, we have a cultural district. And by the way, our whole municipality rests on ensuring that our arts and cultural businesses thrive. Well, that's a tourism strategy. Like, don't let the cultural district borders limit the way you think about this program. It's designed for you to use it however it meets your needs.
Yeah, it's a platform.
And I might suggest, I had provided some slides, if it's possible to go to the second slide of the Ridgefield PowerPoint, we can just show our map, which might be helpful to some people. I don't know if whoever's controlling that can do it. But
You're
anyway,
muted, Michelle.
one of our commissioners just basically took a map from Google of a expansive map looking down on the town, and we just overlaid the historic district. We overlaid what we wanted to have the cultural district be, and then we just wrote in the names of all of the cultural assets on there. And it helped to show how many assets we had, but it also helped to show how they were all walkable. We had quarter-mile markers on that map. Oh, here it is. So on the right-hand side,
Sorry, I'm waiting for. There we go.
yeah. Yeah, so the yellow line on the left is our Main Street. Well, actually, no, just to the right of it is the Main Street that you can see kind of going along 6, 10, 11, 12. And so we just created this map to help ourselves when we were first starting the process to figure out, you know, what exactly is the cultural district going to be? Is it going to be larger than this or not? And we were fairly lucky that we had all of these together and that were all walkable, and other assets are quite a ways farther outside of it. So we were lucky that there weren't, you know, just a few more, just, you know, another quarter mile or another quarter mile to the right or to the north or whatever. But it really helped us to organize our thoughts, and then it became part of our application.
And we've seen towns that are using everything as simple as Google Maps, to Glori's point, like just get a Google Maps and there's both the just regular kind of basic version and then the kind of satellite version. And then towns that are utilizing their GIS systems to be able to enhance that. But that process of even just mapping is helping towns to understand clusters that they didn't even know they had. And an opportunity. So that mapping exercise is such a great opportunity to really understand what's, you know, what is in or out, but more importantly, where are those clusters? Where are their assets and where are their voids, right? Where are there opportunities to infill through this cultural district as well?
Yeah, and this is something one of our commissioners put together in like an hour. It, you know, someone who had some graphic design experience, but wasn't by any means an expert. And I mean, I couldn't have done it, but it wasn't complicated.
Excellent. Well, I'm just looking because I saw something in the chat. Nope. Well, we are just about out of time. This was such a fantastic discussion. I know I learned a lot. I hope that the rest of you did as well. I want to thank our participants so much for sharing your experiences. I think it was great to hear the boots on the ground of what it's like to start a cultural district, and certainly there is a lot here for us to work on in the future. There's information on the chat, more about Connecticut Main Street Center, and please take the time to fill out the survey that we distributed. And I thank you all very much for participating.